Many people are afraid of flying. Some avoid this mode of transportation on principle, others use it out of necessity, experiencing wild fear every time. There are airline passengers who adore the sky, explaining the calmness before the flight by the fact that the risk of getting into an accident on the roads is much higher. An accident can happen to you even if you are sitting on a chair in your own kitchen. So now you're depriving yourself of the pleasure of riding a steel bird. And how, I wonder, do people who have been on the cusp of disaster and have been in a situation where the plane was able to descend from the sky against all predictions feel? Here are some of the strangest landings that kept passengers alive. Landing on the Hudson River. A plane traveling from New York to Seattle collided with a string of common geese and made an emergency descent, but not to the ground, a rare occurrence that forced the huge steel bird to give way to the feathered creatures. Not even 2 minutes after takeoff, the airplane began to rock in different directions. Passengers noticed flames in the engines, and a distress signal and the impossibility to reach the landing place were already transmitted to the radio. 150 passengers waited for water rescuers without serious injuries, thanks to the professionalism of the crew. No one was injured on this flight. They flew without a roof. The Boeing 730, as it turned out, can take its passengers from a distance of 7,000 meters at a speed of 530 kilometers per hour and land without a roof. This flight between the hot cities of Hawaii took only half an hour, but on takeoff there was a serious malfunction and the cockpit door along with the roof over the first 6 rows were blown off. Overboard it was minus 45 degrees Celsius. The airplane was landed on one right engine. In spite of a major crash, the unbuckled stewardesses were seriously shaken on the remains of the cabin. They all survived. Landed on the beach. On St. Martin's Island, the beach is very close to Princess Juliana Airport. Planes fly like doves over the heads of vacationers. It is here that emergency landings are not rare and have not surprised the locals for a long time. An airplane without a nose. Alexander Akapov became a hero after landing a Turkish Airlines airliner in Istanbul. The plane took off successfully, but at altitude the Iron Bird was met by a powerful hailstorm that shattered the glass in the cockpit. The 127 people arriving on the plane were in mortal danger. Showing courage and patience, the pilot landed the plane looking through the window, which means blind. On the ground, Alexander was greeted like a star. Why not? Because now he's a real hero who saved 126 lives. Pilot overboard. In 1990, an airplane heading from the UK to Spain, piloted by Tim Lancaster, lost its windshield. At an altitude of 5,000 meters, the pilot was thrown out of the cockpit. He was saved by his legs being trapped by the instruments and being blown by the wind back to his homeworld. While the co-pilot was transmitting a distress signal and descending, the flight guide was clinging to Tim, preventing him from leaving his seat. After such an unrealistic flight, Tim wasn't able to return to the helm until 6 months later. But when you factor in the fracture of both arms and the insane amount of frostbite he received while traveling to the landing zone, that's a couple weeks, you might say. A cloud of smoke from Vulcan and the lights of St. Elmo's. The Boeing 747 made its way to the landing point with stops on the night flight. Caught in thunderstormy weather, which is not uncommon, the airplane first put on an incredible show for passengers with wings sparkling with smoke and soft puffs of smoke. The radars did not show the storm, and the white cloud, meanwhile, embraced the whole ship. The airplane seemed to catch fire with a blue-white flame in flight. The engines caught fire and failed irrevocably. However, at an altitude of 4,100 meters, the fourth saving engine started working. As if by magic, the rest of the engine started. The plane landed safely. There were 250 people on board. In fact, this accident was caused by volcanic dust, which caused an electrostatic effect called St. Elmo's lights. Gimli's glider. The Boeing 767 of the Canadian Airline Company once became famous for an amazing feat from a great height of 12,000 meters. With engines failing, the airliner successfully glided to the requested Gimli Air Base. From lack of power, the piloting instruments were unresponsive, and at the base, during the emergency landing, an auto race was in progress. The only person who knew about the airbase at that time was the pilot, who turned the car in the right direction. As it turned out later, the accident could have happened because of inattentive maintenance of the airplane. Having simply mixed up the indications for the flight, the airplane was filled with 10 times less kerosene than it needed. Taiga. 2010, on September 7th, a Tu-154B of Alroso Company made an unscheduled landing in the Taiga Zone. The airplane was on its way to Moscow from Yakutia. The aircraft flew for 3.5 hours, after which there was a complete loss of power supply. Fuel was left for 30 minutes of flight. The plane was saved by the 1350m long Izma runway. On board, 72 passengers and 9 crew members prayed for their lives. After passing the runway, the plane entered the taiga forest area and braked itself with trees. There were no casualties on board. Faulty landing gear. The 116 passengers and 5 employees of the airliner were eager to see Astana at its best. The first steps on the landing stage had to be made with fright on their faces. The airplane refused to release the landing gear. The plane braked with its nose for 30 meters, but everyone in the cabin remained unharmed. A great pilot will always make the softest possible landing, even without a front strut. Storm. Landing in a hurricane is complicated to the extreme. In Hamburg, an unpleasant incident occurred due to strong wind gusts. When landing at speeds of over 250 kilometers per hour, the left wing tilted so much that it began to furrow on the ground. The tragedy was avoided by the decision to take to the air again and try to land the airplane smoother. Otherwise, going beyond the runway, there could have been a terrible catastrophe. This is how skillful and focused people who have fallen in love with the sky once and for all control large flying machines.